Okie dokie. So everyone listening. So, okay. This session is about the Cfr Plugin API. That's a module package. And what?
Can you turn on the microphones?
I should turn it on?
Yeah.
Okay. Which one, mic one?
Yeah, that one.
Hello? Okay. So, better like this?
Good, but it's in the camera now, so...
I thought this is for the camera.
Yeah, that's for the camera, but you need to turn it on there as well.
Otherwise this one is off too. But I don't have to do like this, right?
No.
Okay, fine. So, this session is about Cfr Plugin API. That's a module package. And around that there's another ecosystem of modules. So, my name is Andreas Hennings. I'm from Aachen in Germany. I'm a freelance Drupal developer. You can find me as donquixote on GitHub and Drupal, and as Brain for Lunch on Twitter. And that's my tiny website. The module that I'm talking about are these ones here on Drupal. Wow. Come on. Yeah. So this one is like the main one. That is the Configurator Plugin API. It has a number of sub-modules. And then there are some other modules around that, which we get to later. The status of these modules, so far they're only available for Drupal 7. And they are mostly in alpha stability. And this is because I'm still considering to change the API a little bit. And it could be that what I'm showing you here might not be 100% exactly the same that you find online, but it's in development. So, like quick overview of the session. At first, I will give a quick background about plugins in Drupal 7 and 8. Then I will give a quick introduction to Cfr plugin, and I will show a little demo, and then talk about some use cases or how you would use this, and how this would change the way you make a Drupal site, and then show you how it's done in code, and then we'll see how much time is left. So, plugins in Drupal 7 and 8. So when you start a Drupal site, you might start like this. So it's a CMS, so you install Drupal, you do some content, finish, right? So, no, not really, okay. So you do some configuration first. You make some content types and fields and views, and then you make a content. Okay. But not enough. You do some custom code, and then you do some content types, and then you do your content. Okay. But then what happens? You want to tweak your content types. You make some specific templates. You make CSS overrides, and you target your content types, your fields, your views, your other things that you configured before. And you now have some code that depends on your configuration. So if anyone changes the configuration, then some of this code might not work anymore. Some of it might be leftover and dead code. So that's generally not ideal. So you want to have as little of this as possible. That's what I think. And sometimes it can get even worse. Like if you want to get something really fast, and you hard code a node ID or something, and that's like really bad. For instance, you have a CSS rule that has a node ID in it, or a taxonomy term ID or something, because maybe one of your terms have a very specific meaning, and this means that you always need to copy the exact database, or at least when you deploy it, you must be sure that the term ID is the same on production. And I don't do it like this, but I have seen it. So, what we prefer is like to have all the code down and configuration on top of the code. Of course, later you export this to features, and then it's also code, but that doesn't count. Okay? The goal is to have a code that is not dependent on your configuration. So you can then change your configuration, and it doesn't break. So, okay. And in Drupal, a solution for this is plugins, and plugins can mean many things. But wait. These are pieces of code that are project specific in their purpose, but they can be implemented in a generic and reusable way. And then you have some configuration to tell the Drupal which plugin to use where, like to have a views row plugin and use it in this view or something. So, and when your configuration changes, The plugin code doesn't need to change, but maybe some of the configuration, other configuration that depends on it, would need to change. So if you use plugins, then it would maybe look like this. So you have some specific plugins, and then you have configuration on top of it. But actually, it really looks like this, because the thing is that a lot of the things that you find in Drupal core and contrib already, they are kind of plugins. You could say, I mean, plugins is a bit of a fuzzy word, but you could say that a lot of the stuff that you find in Drupal is already plugins. So, what are plugins? As I said, it's a bit of a fuzzy word, but the three aspects that you would find, and until you talk about plugins in Drupal context, would be you have a swappable behavior, you have it controlled by some configuration, so the admin can configure something, and you have an API to extend the possibilities that the admin has to choose something. So you can install a module and you get new options for your plugins. So, because if we have less than this, then we in Drupal, most of the time when we talk about plugins, we wouldn't talk about plugins if it's not all these 3 points. So if it's just swappable behavior and an API, then you can just have a class with a dependency, and you can inject whichever implementation of bar you want, and you have a swappable behavior. And the bar thing can come from an extension, but it's not configurable. There's no UI for this. So it's just in code. So, and if you have only swappable behavior and controlled by configuration, then it could be just like a variable get, and you have just 2 options. And there's no way for a contrib module to give you more options for this. So you want all 3, then have your plugins. So, most of the time when there's a plugin system in Drupal, there's some kind of configuration that's coming from a storage or maintaining the storage, and you have a UI or a form where you choose a plugin and then configure it. It can give you a summary, what is the current status of this plugin, and then it has a behavior. And the behavior could be, for instance, that it shows a field. It's a field formatter. It's some kind of, you could say it's a plugin, and it shows a field. That's the behavior, and the configuration is the combination of the formatter ID and the formatter configuration for this specific formatter. And each formatter can give you a summary, and most of them have also a configuration format. And even if you don't have, then at least you have like the select box where you choose which formatter you want to use for the field. Yeah, and it's stored somewhere, of course. In Drupal 7, we already have some subsystems that are, you can say, are plugin systems. Field types, field formatters, image style effects, text filters. Like image styles themselves, I wouldn't say they are plugins, but image style effects, like the things that you combine to get an image style. And text filters, obviously. So, and in contrib, you get more things like rules, view styles, C-tools. And in Drupal 8, we have this object-oriented plugin API, which is cool. So, in Drupal 8, we have plugin types. Usually, for a plugin type, you make an interface for plugin classes to implement it. You have some kind of plugin manager, factory, discovery thing, which reuses a lot of the common plugin API stuff from Drupal 8. But as far as I know, you still need to write your specific plugin manager for one plugin type. And then you have, I think you have an annotation class for the annotations that you put on your specific plugins. And then when you write plugins, they have to be identified by a plugin ID. And often you do this with an annotation. So you have a class that implements the interface, you put an annotation on it, and that's kind of how you make your plugins. That's maybe not the full picture, but more or less. Often the plugins types are tied to a specific Drupal subsystem. For instance, views plugins, like views row plugin, that's specifically for views. And it will usually know a lot about views, this plugin itself, and it's not so easy to use it outside of views. So even if maybe sometimes the behavior is something that when you first think about it, you don't think about views. You think about something like, I want to make a slider. So, and you end up doing this with views, but that's not the first thing when you think about a slider. At first, you just think about some HTML and JavaScript that does something. And you have items that are sliding. And that they're coming from views. At this point, you don't care. But of course, since you have this Drupal background, you think, okay, that's views. That's how we do this. But then, what if you want to slide field items? Do you need a different implementation for that? Or can you use a view? Yeah, of course, you can use a view and then have it get field items. But that's a bit one step, unnecessary step in between, like to have this view, because you already have like the list of field items. So why do you need to view for this? So then you would have a field formatter that also is a slider. So you have two different implementations of slider that do the same thing, just for different subsystems, and why? So a plugin then typically controls its own configuration, so the class of a plugin can get quite big, and because it does the behavior, which is like display a field item, and it has the configuration thing, like showing a form, showing a summary, and then it usually has like a copy of the configuration, the original one, inside the plugin object. It knows its own plugin ID. Often, I think it knows its label. So it knows a lot of things, but it works. So why not? Okay. So now, how is this thing different? This Cfr plugin system. So in Cfr plugin, every interface is a plugin type. Okay. Every interface is a plugin type. So how can I become a plugin type? In one line of code, how can I do this? Okay, so I thought it was a joke. Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, it's not true. It's not. So more or less, yes, but it depends if there are actually any plugins for this type. So if there are not, then we just don't care about it, about this interface. So there can be interfaces which don't have plugins for them, so then we just don't care, we ignore them. And we can say they are plugin types, but it doesn't matter. So, but it's also there's some interfaces that have a special meaning with Cfr plugin, and we shouldn't make plugins for that. But they would use some kind of meta plugin, so you have an interface that is like your taking care of plugins interface, and then you would have a plugin type that gives you objects of this, so that would be bad, I think. So, but more or less every interface is a plugin type. That's all you need to know. And then a plugin itself, if a plugin is of type foo interface, it should be a recipe to do something. That's the most abstract way to say what a plugin is. A recipe to create an instance of foo interface. That means like an instance of a class that implements foo interface, of course, or a recipe to first display a configuration form, and then, based on whatever you configured, then create your instance of foo interface. So in either way, you end up with a foo interface object. And this object then does your behavior, and this object doesn't care about where it's coming from. So every plugin is identified by a plugin ID, and it's a label, so that's not so different than Drupal 8. Recipe 2, that can mean two things. At first, it can mean a class name. So if your definition has a class name, then it will just make an instance of this class. Or it can be a static method, because it doesn't care. Like, if you have a static method, you just call the method and then get something that it's like a factory method. And then a plugin definition, that's like an array where you describe how to make such a plugin object. Either it describes how to create a instance of foo interface, or how to create a configuration form and this stuff. So they are registered with hook Cfr plugin info, but there's also support for annotation discovery, like in Drupal 8. So this is how such a definition looks like. You have here handler class, which is the class, and here's the interface. So actually, here's like the array of all the definitions that you're currently collecting, and here you have the interface, and then you have your specific plugin ID, and handler class and a label. So that's it. And instead of handler class, you could have other things. Handler class is just for this one case where it will directly instantiate this class, and you have your behavior object. So most of the plugin types in Cfr API, they describe minimal behavior types, and they try to be independent of Drupal subsystems, so it can be reused more freely across Drupal. So a plugin creates a behavior object, and it can have options, like configuration options, because it can show a form. And these options can be other plugin types. So you can have one plugin that uses as an option another plugin, and then you have a combination of those. The behavior object is instance of the plugin type interface, obviously, but it does not know anything about the plugin system around it. You could just create it just like that, in code, without caring that it's a plugin, and you don't have any overhead for this. It doesn't know it's a plugin, it doesn't know its plugin ID, it doesn't know its plugin label, it doesn't know its raw configuration. It's mostly like if your configuration is like this, then it just maybe picks the stuff of the configuration that you need, cleans it up, and then gives this as a parameter. But it doesn't get the raw configuration. So this object here would never be able to show the form or the summary of what you call it shows in the plugin. And it could be a composition of other objects, but then again, it doesn't know where these objects are coming from. They just inject it in the constructor and that's it. So before it gets too theoretical, I do a little demo. So this is a page which we got like here, Cfr Plugin API, and this actually depends on an extension, an additional module, but I think it's a nice way to get an overview of all the different plugin types that are currently available here. And these are just those interfaces that have an existing plugin, at least one. And what is here, for now you don't care about it. These are presets, but that's going too far. So what happens if I click at this? This is actually the interface that makes this plugin type. It's really small. The only method here is process image, and it says like it gets a render array which has theme image, and it has all the stuff that you expect from theme image, like it has width and height and the image source URL. And the output is another render array. So maybe the input image was the original image, and the output is like image style, depending on your implementation of it. And whoops. Oh, I should maybe look here. That's smarter. So this form shows like what you can choose here. You can say image style, and then select like which image style you want to do, or you can do something else. So this was maybe not the most exciting one. The most interesting one is actually, this entity display thing. An entity display looks like this, the full interface. The most important one is this one here. It says build entity. It gets an entity type, it gets an entity, and it gives you a render array. So you can do a lot of things with this. You can show the entity title, or you can show the entire entity in a view mode, or you can have other things. Like any implementation can decide what it wants to display there. And this is just for performance. There's just a variation of this method, because sometimes it's just faster to process multiple entities at once. So this is why I added this other method. And this page just grabs this from code just to get an overview of this. So. And if you create an entity display preset, you could do this here. But I will do something else instead. So here we have a node, which is just a regular node with a gallery on it. So this is the gallery. It's an image field with multiple images. And there's some other stuff here for this gallery node. And we have here a demo module where you get this extra tab where you can play around with entity displays. So let's say entity display title raw. So it's just the entity title with nothing on it. It gives you a plugin summary here. It's just say, okay, I chose entity title raw, and it's displayed test gallery. That's the title. Okay, not very interesting. Let's use a processed entity display. And now we have the decorator pattern at work. So entity display, let's just say this one again. And processor. Here, these are the ones that we usually you would see, but I made like some for fun in a test module somewhere. So I'll just do like this. And let's show it. And now it has like a border around it. And the point about this is you have like these processors, and the processor, it takes a render array, it gives you a render array, and does something with it. And one thing is to make this frame, but you could do some other things with it. You can have an implementation that does all kind of things. So, and to make it a bit more interesting, instead of this here, we say field with formatter. We use the images field. Image. Yeah, that's medium is fine. So this will give you the images. Not very exciting yet. And now you have a processor for your how your images are displayed. And this kind of thing is available for every field that you do like this. And it controls not the field itself, but the way the items are displayed. You could have something really... Oops, I'm looking in the wrong place. Okay. I should look here, of course. You can do it like HTML, this was a bit boring. I know that list. Okay. Let's just do it. So now they're displayed. I know not listed. 10 minutes left. Oh. Okay. I use this one here. This is just for demo purposes. And now they look like this. So this is just some stupid inline CSS. Okay. So I think this is enough for demo, or maybe not. So you have, this was a list format, how to display these items in a list, and then we see that we have the same thing here in views. It's here actually. So here as a views display, you can use list format, and then you can again choose which list format you want, and you have this crazy build option here. So you just implement this once. It could be a slider or something, and you have it available in views and in other places. And also your entity display thing, you have it available here. It's an entity display. You can choose all the options that you had on the other page. And oops, if we go back here, manage display, we see down here there's an option to add a new entity field, which you then, if I already made one there, you can configure and you get the same options here. So you can have plugins that are available all across different systems. So your new design workflow could, site building workflow could look like this. You have a graphic designer who does some graphical user design, and then you have an HTML developer who knows JavaScript, CSS, and HTML, but doesn't care about Drupal so much. And he makes CSS components and HTML components. And then you have a plugin developer who integrates these components as plugins without really caring about how they are going to, where they are going to appear on the site. And then you have a site builder who just combines these plugins and builds a site. And of course, for a lot of this, you can use already existing functionality in Drupal. You need this for all of it, but it gives you a lot of new options. So now I don't have so much time left, I guess.
6 minutes.
6 minutes. So. There's different modules that are part of like this entire ecosystem of modules. One is render kit. This means 6 minutes until I ask the questions, or until everyone has to leave the room? Okay, whatever. So render kit is just a collection of classes and interfaces that do atomic behaviors in Drupal. And if you think about typical behaviors in a web CMS, we would say display a piece of content in a specific way, wrap HTML snippet in another HTML container for some decoration, display a range of animated snippets in a decorative list for some way, like a slider or something. In Drupal, this will mean a render array from an entity, a render array to another render array for a container wrapper, or a combined render array for a list of render arrays, and there's some more things you could do. And this is all in RenderKit. You have a number of these classes, like this entity display thing, or this is one implementation of entity display. That's just a title implementation, which just says build entity and just the title. It's very boring. So view mode, it's another implementation which does the view mode rendering. I built the render array from the view mode. And then you can combine these things, like image with processor. This has two options. One option is like the entity image interface that gets an image from the entity. And the next thing is like the thing that makes a render array from the image. So you have two steps and you can combine these things. And these are different plugin types that are, or in this case, what you see here is just different interface, but then when this turns into plugins, then you have this different plugin type that where you can choose from to decide how this thing should be constructed. So this is how you would do the composition in code. So RenderKit so far, it was just everything in code. And now you have the Cfr plugin, which is about configuring this thing. So we have this again, you have configuration, and then you have a behavior object. So how could this be expressed as an interface, or this stuff? And for this we have an interface that's called Configurator interface. There's three methods: conf get value, conf get summary, and conf get from. The most important is this one here. Takes the configuration from somewhere and gives you the object, like this behavior object. And why is it called get value? That's a bit strange. Because we also use the same interface for other things. The value could be something else. It doesn't have to be an object. It's just most of the time we want an object, but sometimes it could be something else. It could be a field name or something. Yeah, entity bundle name. That's a configurator, but it doesn't give you an object. It gives you just a bundle name. So, and each configurator has its own format. For instance, if it's just a bundle name, then the configuration itself would be just a string, which is the bundle name. But the conf could be dirty. It comes from a database. It was stored there at some time, but it could be dirty, so it has to survive all kind of different values for configuration. So, for instance, this is a simplified example. For the view mode, you have above view mode we have a form where you can choose a view mode, then you have a summary that just says which view mode you have, and then down there it creates from it checks is the view mode fine, and then it creates the actual behavior object, which is this entity display view mode, which itself doesn't care where it's coming from. This object doesn't know that it was created in such a configurator and doesn't have anything to do with the plugin API. So far, this kind of thing gives you a configurable behavior, but it doesn't give you this extensibility yet. So therefore, we have a drill down configurator where you can choose an ID, and then it chooses like a nested configurator for this. So the configuration array actually consists of, like here, configuration ID and configuration options. And the first thing is like to choose which plugin ID you want, and then the other thing, the options, are then passed on to the next configurator, which is the one coming from the plugin. So per plugin type, we have one top-level configurator, and you can access it like this. In Drupal 7, we don't have this service container, so it's just something like this. And yeah, this is like the format of this conf thing. And this conf value with this conf would give you then actually this entity display implementation. And since this is not strictly forced technically to give you actually one of these things, you would then, to be safe, check if it really implements this interface. Because there could be something going wrong, and then you never know. So and then you can actually use this. You build from your node, you build your render array, and just render it, and that's it. So, and these top-level things that they are per plugin type, they exist, and these inner configurators, they are based on this configuration in this hook. And yeah, the configuration might look like this. This is just one of them, and then this would be another one. So this is two for entity display interface. And oops. Yeah, internally what happens is that it just creates this new entity display view mode thing and then calls this this with another this is the inner configuration. That is teaser. The outer configuration was ID to have this view mode thing, and the inner configuration was teaser. So as we said before, like the plugin is a recipe to do something, either to create an instance of this interface or to create a configurator, which then gives you the interface. So yeah, like this. So, and because there's actually 4 options, because you have either, for every option you have either class or, okay, then it's either a class or a factory. And this can be, the configurator is like if you have the form, and the other one is just the object. So, and actually this session is made in a way that I can stop at any time, and you have, what follows is less important than I was actually telling you up to now. So, if you want, you can stop it and you can ask questions. Yeah.
What makes this differ from the combination of entity view mode, display suite, contract field formatters, and core field formatters? Because through this I see a lot of custom development. For me, but it's maybe my look into it, it seems that there are a lot of contract solutions already available.
Yes, and I've been using them all the time.
Yeah.
So what I see a lot is like a site where you have tons of view modes, and then you have the same view mode settings repeated throughout different content types, and then you still cannot achieve everything with your formatters and your view modes, because if something, for instance, you want to use an image field as a background image for something. Like you want to show some stuff from the node and then it has the image field as a background image. Then you use, what I've seen is people doing a template or a preprocessor and then grabbing this value from the field, and they have to hard code the field name. And if you do something else with your fields, then this doesn't work anymore. So you still end up with a lot of custom code that is specific to a specific field type or something, or field name or entity type. And so this is just one more level of flexibility. I already used all these other options for different projects, and you can go quite far with this, with all the existing options. And I would always recommend, instead of having templates, overrides, and theme processors, you use custom formatters or custom display suite fields. That's already good, but this just gives you even more flexibility. More questions? Okay, was it is too much information? Maybe also? Okay. So then, yeah, should I kick out people or yeah?
We'll just give you a applause.
Okay.